How do you direct a superhero movie?
Super duper hype is, hey. Make sure you don't forget it. Don't forget to mention. That was nice.
Sorry, wrong question. How do you get there? How do you go from indie to Hollywood? Is it luck? Do you need to be part of some cult? I've dreamed to make a Hollywood film from the time I held my first Handycam, and from obsessing over this for decades, I finally found a roadmap that dozens of Hollywood directors and producers follow to making it. And it all connects to horror. If you saw Matt Reeves' The Batman, you'll agree that the film feels darker and grittier than almost any other superhero film you've seen prior. Despite its PG-13 rating, the film hits harder than rated R films like Logan or Deadpool. There are so many things that create Gotham's dark atmosphere, from Greg Fraser's gritty cinematography to the wet and rainy production design of James Chinlund. But an element that stands out more than any other is Reeves' ability to tap into his indie roots as a director of horror. And this isn't just the perfect pairing of director and project. If you Google the top directors in Hollywood, you'll find that they're all white males. Okay, this is the wrong Google search. Let's look at some of the biggest blockbusters released in recent years. The directors of those projects all began by making horror films. So what is it about horror?
What makes a good horror movie? I think stories, characters that you care about really make a big difference. And I do think the soundscape is very important for movies of this genre.
James Wan, director of The Conjuring, Saw, and Aquaman, brings up that it's character, story, and sound design that makes a good horror film. But the pillars to make an immersive horror film are the exact same pillars that make a good film in general, so we need to dig deeper. Horror films are notorious for being cheap productions. The typical budget for a Hollywood film is around $65 million plus. Halloween was $325,000, Psycho was $806,000, Jaws, $9 million, Saw, $1.2 million. These films are affordable and make a ton of money at the box office. This is why you see a surge of much more independent horror films than you do of any other genre. Fake blood and special effects are much more affordable than blowing up a block in New York City, and almost just as effective in creating a response in an audience. Films like Steven Spielberg's Jaws didn't have the resources or budget to fix their robotic shark, so instead they resorted to simply not showing it. The result was the rebirth of one of the most terrifying tools in cinema history: suspense. The original budget for the iconic film Evil Dead was around $90,000. That film would later make $2.5 million at the box office, and the director would go to creating Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3, along with the new Doctor Strange film. But the sad reality is, in the last few years, hundreds of horror films have come and gone because of how effective this formula is. Most of them ranked poorly, many of them you haven't even heard of. Even I've made two that never really saw the light of day. So have we missed the golden opportunity to make a horror film and get recognized by Hollywood? I don't think so. David Sandberg, director of the Annabelle films, Shazam 1, and Shazam 2, made his debut in Hollywood only a few years ago with a feature film titled Lights Out, a feature that was an adaptation of his short viral film with the same title. Since, he's made several horror features and now one of the bigger directors in the industry. I believe the next up-and-coming horror director will most likely be KANE Parsons, the 16-year-old filmmaker behind one of the scariest horror films on the internet, Backrooms. Totally see it if you have not seen it. It's freaking terrifying. This film is a prime example of how horror hooks an audience with emotion and flavor by focusing on a storyteller's unique skills of visual effects. But above all else, horror allows creatives to explore big feelings on a little budget, a genre that gives flexibility to filmmakers. You can make the highest grossing film of all time by getting your friends together in the woods and shooting a found footage film. You can have villains that no one sees or special effects that suck, but it just adds flavor. The audience of horror is forgiving and diehard. When a horror film sucks, it can become a cult classic, and if a horror film is awesome, it can be remembered in history. It has always been intimidating to find your place in big budget genres or indie smash hits, viral sensations, or hilarious comedies. But over the years, horror has proven to be the backbone for independent and Hollywood cinema, creating the fundamental roadmap filmmakers need to find their trajectory and voice in an overwhelming and scary industry. Something also to point out is not all of the films were horror genre pieces that were kind of the bridge point for these directors to make their success. Some of them were smash hit comedies or really good indie dramas. But I think the through line between every single director who's kind of made it to where they are now is they had some sort of quality or trait that they used within their original films that emphasized their main skill. Bringing up this filmmaker KANE Parsons, which has made this unbelievable movie, 100% please take a look at it. He is emphasizing his own quality in order to become recognized. And by doing that quality of being an incredible visual effects artist, yes, this movie is all VFX. It's absolutely ridiculous. He has stood out above the crowd. But the major thing to recognize is the only way you will be recognized is by emphasizing a skill that you have inherently within you. There's no use into trying to use something else that someone else has already done before. Jaws made its success because Spielberg was able to harness his ability of building suspense by showing nothing. And maybe it was his ability, maybe it was his limitations, but whatever it was, he was able to do that. And the long list of directors who I mentioned in this video were able to create those skills. I recommend watching their early work and then looking at their new work and comparing what things sort of bridge the gap. James Wan is actually one of my favorite filmmakers to look at for that. Very clear similarities between his indie work and his Hollywood work. And if you're interested in harnessing your inner skills, learning about what are those things that make you, I've actually wrote my first ever book, The Unoriginal Guide to Being Original, and I would absolutely love if you would join the pre-order wait list, which I've added a link to in the description below. This is one of the biggest projects that I've ever worked on. It's the first time I've ever talked about it with you guys. I've been working on it for years, and it would really mean a lot if you were to take a look at it. I talk about all things originality, everything from building your own brand, figuring out who you are, creating projects that matter to you, having a voice, saying F you to haters, how to actually steal from other projects that are already out there and to create your own original format and formulas. I built the rule book for authenticity, spent many years doing it. Again, there's a link to it in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for tuning. If you can, subscribing would be a big help. We're almost to 100,000, woo! And that's it. Absolutely love you. Have an amazing day.